joining products from two great companies. Installing the JessEm TS clear-cut stock guides to an Incra TSLS table saw fence. A better way. Hi there and welcome to WB Fun Woodworking. I'm Don. Today I'm going to show you how I installed the JessEm Clear-Cut TS Precision Stock Guides to my Incra TSLS Table Saw fence on my SawStop. Wow, is that a mouthful. And simply, I attach these stock cut guides, I like to call them, to my Incra fence on my SawStop. Well, I know some of you out there are going to say, wait a minute. Why didn't you buy that little kit that JessEm sells for installing the stock guides to an Incra fence? Well, in my case, it didn't work. And I'll show you later why that didn't work. But this is also a video that might help anyone that has an Incra fence. This is a better installation, in my opinion, and I'll show you why it's better in this video. It's also an installation that anyone could do that has a fence other than the Incra that has T-tracks on the top of it. So this is a video that might help some of you out there for installing the JessEm Clear-Cut TS stock guides to your table saw fence. Some of you may have noticed recently that Woodcraft had a sale on the JessEm stock cut guides for the table saw. I've been wanting those for years. They're wonderful. They're fantastic for the table saw and very good for safety on the table saw. This is one of the stock cut guides. It's made out of very strong aluminum. It's extremely well engineered and well made by JessEm in Canada. But I couldn't afford them, but when they offered them for $50 off at Woodcraft, I couldn't resist, and I had enough money saved up, so that's what I bought. Those stock cut guides go on a rail that sits on top of the table saw fence, which is very nice, except I have an Incra table saw fence instead of a Biesmeyer or the fence that comes with a regular SawStop, so it won't fit on here. There's this positioner that works with the fence is too tall. JessEm makes a kit, and I bought the kit, and it has little risers that rise this above the positioner. Unfortunately, the way my table saw is set up and my positioner is set up, they're too short. As shown here, the rails for the JessEm guides is wider than the Incra fence, and so it overhangs the front of the fence, which wouldn't work. The reason for that is the positioner on the Incra fence. It's in the way. I can't push the rail back farther. As I mentioned before, JessEm is aware of the problem, so they sell this kit to raise their rail above the Incra positioner. Their kit comes with some riser blocks, the hardware for attaching them, and an Allen wrench. I attached the riser blocks to my Incra fence according to the JessEm directions. Notice that the front edge of the riser blocks is even with the face of the Incra fence. This will be important later on in the video. After placing the JessEm rail on top of the riser blocks, I noticed there was still a problem with the positioner. After removing one of the riser blocks, I placed it in front of the positioner, and you can see it's too short. So now, as most woodworkers do, I have to problem solve. What I've done is I looked through my scrap pile and I came up with this piece of scrap walnut, this piece of scrap, and it happens to be the exact same width I mean, it's really exact same width as this rail for the stock cut guides. So what I'm planning to do is attach that to the top of my fence using these T-track nuts and knob. They'll go right in that T-track, and I'll drill holes in the walnut so that I can attach it to this T-track that's on the fence. So I have some work, of course, to do on the walnut, trying to get it cut to the right length and sanding and finishing before I can get back to it. But I had these things all installed, ready to go. I thought they were going to be perfect, and like I said, they were too short. Now we can see with the walnut in place, it is above the top of the positioner. So the JessEm rail will clear the positioner. Now we still have a problem because the piece of walnut is the same width as the JessEm rail. The piece of walnut still overhangs the front of the Incra fence. That's because the positioner is still in the way of the walnut. To solve this, I'm going to cut a notch in the back of the walnut. According to the directions, it's best to mount the rail for the JessEm guides 3/4 of an inch behind the face of the fence. But I had to find out if this placement would interfere with the fine adjustment knob on the Incra fence. When I discovered that it wasn't interfering, I drew a line across the Incra fence so I knew how deep to make my cut in the piece of walnut. Now with the notch cut, I was ready for the next step. As shown here, the piece of walnut did its trick. The rail for the JessEm guides now clears the positioner, but it's not in the way of the fine adjustment knob on the Incra fence. And it's also 3/4 of an inch back from the face of the Incra fence. You'll see why that's important later on. The next step in the process is attaching the piece of walnut to the T-track on the Incra fence. Remember that it has to be 3/4 of an inch back from the face of the Incra fence. According to my drill guide, this is a number 8 screw, and so it needs a 1/8 inch drill bit to anchor it. This drill guide is fantastic. I wish I could find another one. JessEm provides a way for lengthening these arms. And they have here some screws that need to come out, and they supply an Allen wrench for taking out those screws. And you notice when I take those out, this arm drops. Now again, this is the minimum angle that I want. I've locked it into that position. So now what I can do is take these screws and put them back in to a hole that's down there on the arm. So now when I take my protractor, it shows that that arm is at 30 degrees. And remember, that's the least they'll allow. That's the minimum angle. So anything above that angle is okay. So when a piece of wood goes through here and pushes up on the arm, it's going to be at a greater angle than 30 degrees. We'll show that in a minute. Now I need to do the same thing with the other arm. So now both arms are set to 30 degrees. So any time that something goes under them and pushes up, it's going to be at an angle greater than 30 degrees. Since this is a video on installation, I'm not going to show how they work as far as holding the wood to the fence necessarily or making a test cut. But I am going to show you how you know that it's set up correctly. So in order to set these up, you loosen these bolts here, lift the arms up and set the black piece, this black piece right here and there on top of the piece of wood, not the rollers that the wood is going to roll under later on. And then tighten these knobs. Okay, those are tightened down. Now I'm going to pull out the piece of wood. Then I'm going to pretend like I'm cutting a piece and I'm going to send it through the rollers. Now what you may have noticed is right here, this popped up a little bit. There's a spring here. They're spring loaded. So I'm going to push it in again and you can see how that popped up. This will not come backwards. It will not come back at me. In order to get it loose, I have to push it all the way through. That's how you know that these are set up and ready to go. Earlier in the video, I made sure that the JessEm rail is 3/4 of an inch back from the face of the Incra fence. And this is why. If I ever wanted to run a board across the fence in the vertical position like this, the arms would be in the way if they were any closer to the face of the Incra fence. This is also the reason I think this setup is better than the one that JessEm provides. If I used their riser blocks, my rail would be right up against the front of the Incra fence. The arms would overhang the front of the Incra fence. One thing I've noticed, however, is that I'm going to need a push stick. This is my current push stick, but it runs into the guides here. So I'm going to have to come up with a different push stick. So I'm going to be searching YouTube. So if you have a really good idea for a push stick in a video or even on a website, send it to me. And I'll see if that's the one that I want to use. In addition to my push stick that I'm going to have to replace, I'm going to have to replace this little tray that was sitting up here on top of my fence. I use that to put pencils and the push stick and the remote to my dust collection. So I'm going to have to come up with a better solution to this. So I'm designing one, and I'll have a video out on that as well. Well, if you like this video, remember to give it a thumbs up down below. If you have any questions about the installation or anything about the Incra fence, please put them down below and I'll answer those as best I can, and make any comments about the video that you'd like to make. Please share it with others. If you know someone who has an Incra fence or a fence with T-slots on the top of it, and they might be interested in putting a JessEm clear-cut stock guides on theirs, then share it with them, and they might be able to figure out a way to do it based on what I did. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do that today. And when you do subscribe, remember to ring that notification bell so that you'll know when I put out videos. And thank you all very much for watching. Okay, those are tightened down. Now I'm going to pull out the piece of wood. Then I'm going to pretend like I'm cutting a piece and I'm going to send it through the rollers. Now what you may have noticed is right here, this popped up a little bit. There's a spring here. They're spring loaded. So I'm going to push it in again, and you can see how that popped up. This will not come backwards. It will not come back at me. In order to get it loose, I have to push it all the way through.